Hello, listener. What you're about to hear is a Warui Deshou Patron Unlock. This is material which our Patreon supporters have early access to. If you'd like to experience these episodes when they're at their freshest, become a Warui Deshou patron today at patreon.com/WARUIDESHOU.
Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and MBs, and welcome to Warui Deshou's second stream, the premium hour of premium podcasting goodness. Just unfortunately, it's not necessarily about a premium show. I'm maybe, tipping my hand a little bit earlier on my thoughts on Kabukicho Sherlock as it happens. But then again, if you've been following this podcast for a while now, you'll know that I've not been entirely fond of it, but that's just me being cruel to be kind, Anyway, I'm Shaden, and as always, joining me, from across the ocean but close to my heart, it is, of course, the Soul Doctor.
You singed my ears with that bird that you just gave Kabukicho Sherlock.
I'm always spitting hot fire around here. It's my superpower, I can breathe fire, but only when I'm talking down a microphone and only in the sense that I critique stuff.
As long as you don't take off the swimsuit.
Oh, well, that unfortunately does happen for one character in this episode, without his permission, but, well, it was amusing.
That's the episode
Although
title,
I will say
by
this,
the way.
Yeah, no, it is, yeah, I know. I mean, I'll say this, right. I thought we were done with the Sherlock.
We were.
I know, I thought that I thought we were doing that, but now we've got the Watch Long.
The Watts ass. Just
yes.
hanging out. And the shirt.
Okay, is that the new peer-to-peer messaging system for people who want to do sexting? What's ass?
and yes, the Sherlock did threaten to make an appearance.
No, thankfully it did not appear. Like, there's only so many times that can appear before the show becomes unbroadcastable. Like, it's off the shelves. Like, it won't appear ever again except on the dirtiest, nastiest torrent site on the internet. But anyway, so folks at home, this is, of course, our second stream format. So if you're not familiar with this, if you're joining us late in the game, second stream is where we strip away all of the plot summary, apart from where it's relevant for context or talking points, and instead just focus on the meat of it, like getting down into the nitty-gritty of a show and talking about like how it works, themes, ideas, construction, all that sort of stuff. We're just going to skip right to the good stuff, if you will. So with that in mind, I'm going to pass the baton over to Doc to start off this week when we cover episode 8, which, just to give you some context, by the way, is a direct continuation of episode 7. I know that might sound surprising, but Sherlock this far has been mostly serialized, as in the episodes, like, with some exceptions and little notes here and there, you could probably watch them out of order without too much consequence, but this is definitely a straight-up follow-up. Kind of. Sort of.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely did another thing where they kind of go roundabout rather than straight ahead. But I will mention that a little bit later, because I think they sort of do that twice in this episode. They kind of come back around to a couple different things, or they take the long way around on a couple different plot points. But Shadon, I quite like this episode. I was into it. I thought it was very fun. And I think that's the result of two things. I think that is the result of the content of the episode being fun, but it's also the result of my expectations shifting for this show. So you had mentioned to me off mic that the first time you watched the show, it kind of washed over you a little bit. And I do think that is entirely fair, because I don't think the show has done a great job thus far of rewarding the kind of
attentive viewing.
Kind of investment. And I also don't think it's been a particularly good example of, and, please object if you feel differently, Shadon, or anyone in our Discord, because, as I've said, I'm not a big connoisseur of detective fiction, of mystery stories, but I don't feel like this has been a particularly good detective show. If
I may just say, when the biggest mystery is about the show is what were the writers thinking when they were making it, they fucked up somewhere.
That's right. Going meta with the mystery. So, yeah, I mean, I think looking at it from that lens, it's not great. So I have ceased to look at the show from that lens. I've also ceased to... I know a bee in your bonnet has been the tone thus far, and I think us being a third of the way through the show gives us license to make a few judgments about the show as a whole. And I think apart from that one episode, the very first, and as you say, first impressions are important, but on the pie chart of the show, it is only that one episode that has really been overly serious in terms of the mystery being solved and the danger to everyone involved. Am I misremembering?
Well, you do recall the end of this episode post-credits.
Oh yeah, so
did you?
Right.
Yes.
Well, that's Well, but still, in terms of the ratio, the screen time that kind of tone gets, it's still in the minority by a lot, by a whole lot.
Yeah.
And most of the other 7 episodes, again, the piece you talked about notwithstanding, and maybe you could argue like a few Moriarty moments, has been kind of a fun, if scatterbrained, kind of romp. Very much seeming to take a lot of detours. Like, we'll introduce a character like Irene, and will be confronted directly at the end of the last episode with her story regarding the USB drive. And then we'll kind of...
with all the scrambled data on the
hey.
Ho, ho, ho.
But then we'll go on a detour from that into something else. So the show does like to take its detours. But again, I think I am looking at it now as more of a fun ensemble show that, has some crimes and they are solved.
Well, I can say there are definitely some crimes in this show, but they're on the part of the creators.
Hey!
Oh, it's too easy to make these jokes. It's just too easy. I kid.
But yeah, not a great detective show, but again, I'm not a show that I'm like, oh man, if only they would get back to what they were doing. Like, this is supposed to be a serious thing. Like, I think at this point we can be like, okay, this is, again, a fun ensemble romp type show, and the crimes are going to be solved, but, that's not really, I don't know, it's not meant to be like a detective story in the way that the original Sherlock Holmes was, or something like that. It seems to be doing a different thing. And I'm okay. With that, I maybe that's not the right way to say it. I guess I'm willing to meet it on those terms, and doing that this episode, and I have a number of reasons why, again, that are about the episode itself rather than my own way of viewing it. But looking at the episode that way, I had a good time. I thought it was fun.
On the second rewatch, I liked it more than the first, I will confess. At the time that I watched this originally, all of the stuff involving Emery, the client's daughter...
Let me just say.
Go on. I knew this would... you'd have fondness for this, but please, go right ahead, my good sir.
It's Emily. She's called Emily. Like, the translation is wrong. If you... Listen... Japanese language, when saying Emily, will say Emiri. And it's going to sound like Emiri, but the L and R consonant sounds in our language blend together in the Japanese language. That's why when people talk about English, they say English and not English. So it's easily, she's called Emily. I don't know why they did not just do that in the subtitles.
Fair enough. So from here on out, I'll refer to her by her true name of Claudia. Right, let's crack on.
Thank you. Even though she has a Japanese mother, because her mother, I think, has a Japanese name.
All of the people in this fucking show, like it's like that classic trope on TV tropes. Like it's like Jim, Bob, and Eric. Like you just start blending together.
Milverton.
Caucasian names.
And Emily.
Yeah, Milverton.
What a great name, Milverton. Oh my god.
Oh, Jesus Christ. So, okay, I like that stuff a lot more with Emily this time around. I think I realised why. Because this entire episode, through two different characters, one of which being Emily and the other being Irene, is mostly about dunking on Sherlock, and given how much of a prick he's been previously, it was worth giving him a dressing down. Like, this is the thing that I've alluded to in the past about the idea of Sherlock as a character, in that they can go too far into a kind of like vicarious wokeness, shall we say, of look at how smart this character is. I'm going to be as smart as they are and prove that everyone's a moron except for me. But that is firstly very toxic, and secondly, it doesn't make for interesting storytelling. I could not give two shits about a character who solves everything with no trouble whatsoever and spends like a good third of the runtime of whatever work they're in explaining how they solved it in a very condescending manner. I don't care for that. And okay, that is still part of the conceit of Sherlock, but there's a question of how far you take it that is an issue that I have with certain adaptations of the work. Like, for example, the Benedict Cumberbatch one that you and I have lambasted so many times. So, seeing the Sherlock like getting taken down a peg, like, that's actually something I think the show's done well, where it's built him up to this point where we've seen him being that smug prick that he is, you know, like, showing off how he knows stuff. And then we've had moments like with Lucy, for example, and then with Irene in this one, where they actually then play against that and use it for good comedy by showing, oh, you know, this overblown, overwrought, overacted Rakugo nonsense that you're using to explain the crime and the mystery. No, we've already figured it out. You're slowing things down. You know, catch up, Shirley. Wakey, wakey. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the jokes that happened with Emily and Sherlock as well, but also the surprisingly, like, cheery and light-hearted and very warm way in which he actually ends up looking after in the end by giving her his Rakugo figure that he's meticulously assembled himself. Now, of course, he's too, you know, proud to admit that he did it because he might actually like her a little bit. Because he has that, like, smirk on his face and, like, well, right, whatever. Yeah. Feelings are for losers. But he still does that. And as the show is, again, well established, like, the Rakugo thing for Sherlock isn't just a gimmick to, like, do a different way of explaining the mystery after the fact. It also serves as a defining part of his character, which I will definitely credit the show for, that it's not just we're putting this in for a gimmick necessarily, but we're going to make it a part of who he is. And so with how, for example, in the previous episode, he was willing to go so far for a baseball card or the equivalent thereof of one of his favourite Rakugo performers, to see him give away that thing that he more than likely bought for himself to Emily. There are shades to this character. He's not always a complete tosser.
They finally...
So who knows where they might go with that?
Yeah, they finally took a second to humanize him in an endearing way rather than a, like, eye-rolly way. Because, like, I think he's been sort of... We've seen that he's a bit childlike before. Like, when he, like you said, he gets gleeful over the Rakugo card. It's like, oh, he's like a kid in a lot of ways. He doesn't clean his room and... he obsesses over his toys. but I still found that annoying. Where the stuff with Emily was nice because you have this child, this man child, sort of pitted against this actual child who wins in the end. Because she's a real child, and she throws his weird like chocolate rice back at him, and yeah, like
calling out what we've always said, like feeling almost like she's got the audience perspective that this is weird and stupid and you shouldn't do this.
And yeah, they kind of came together at the end and had a nice, warm, as you said, relationship. And if they do this a little bit more, maybe I'll actually like Sherlock. I'm not quite there yet, but I appreciated this, and I appreciated like it sort of served a dual purpose for me, where it did the humanizing thing, and it also got him off screen. And the episode was more about Irene. Which, can we get case file 222 Kabukicho Irene, please? I'll take this show. I want more of that.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. So, I just have a quick question to ask you though. Like, did it seem to you like that this episode was a bit contrived in a sense, though? Because the reason that Emily ends up with Sherlock is because her mother ends up falling ill at the bar. But the thing that gets me though is that Sherlock is seen leaving. Surely the others are only like minutes ahead at most. Get Watson back. He's a doctor. Don't take it to the hospital and leave the kid alone when you know full well that her husband is like out trying to get her back.
Oh, completely. I think this was such an obvious play, like putting those two together. It contrived is the right word. It did its job. Yeah. But it definitely was a little hacky.
Yeah, I think that, when you have a mystery show which demands your attention, you might want to make sure that there aren't plot holes you could drive a London double-decker bus through. Just saying. I mean, if there had been, for example, an establishing shot that showed that, like, Sherlock had been there for a solid hour after they had left, somehow, I don't know how you would necessarily have done that, that'd have been fine. But that, like, it just happened so quickly. I was like, wait, Watson's literally just out the door. Bring it back. He is literally a doctor. Having, sort this shit out.
It's true.
But yeah, no, I'm in agreement with you. And the funny thing is, now that the more I'm thinking about this episode, the more positive I do feel about it. Admittedly, it is still relying a bit too much on crude humour for my taste. Now, I admit, I have a potty mouth and I have an incredibly dirty mind. So I'm not one to necessarily cast shade on this show for, having that. But for me, often good humour is, again, one where you, like with Sherlock himself, you build this concept up and then you tear it down, as opposed to relying on cheap yucks like, oh, look, Kobayashi got an itchy crotch last time. It's funny when people have itchy crotches. I'm like, that's like drawing from the, dictionary of comedy, if you will. Like, anyone can do that. But not every show can actively build a work of fiction, actually, can build its own comedy from its own like characters and situations by, carefully putting them together. To me, like, a good dick joke every now and again can be amusing, but you don't want to have all of it all the time.
Unless you're the show, I guess.
Yeah,
multiple characters in the show, like, were only interested in getting off screen and fapping.
Yeah. By the way, Kobayashi, like, he recovered very quickly from his crotch rot.
It's true.
Like, this was like the day before.
I guess it was, right? I mean, all we know as far as the time in the show was that this episode takes place 6 months after episode 1. As far as, like, the time between each episode is unclear. So, I don't know, maybe it's, like, a month later. Oh, wait, no, you're right. I'm totally wrong, because this is a continuation of episode 7, and that had happened last episode, so I'm just super wrong. You're right.
I have a question for you, by the way, Doc, just as a small point. How do you feel about the fact that the Irene said that, I don't know the password, I was going to decrypt it, good luck with that, and then the whole egg-like thing basically gets abandoned, or at least not revealed at this particular point. Credits the show at least for, not ending on forgetting about it entirely, but having... God, how strange is it going to be when I'm going to say that I'm actually glad Jack is back?
It's weird.
Like, it's weird to say that, and I say that only more because I would have been incredibly annoyed if this episode had ended with the egg-like USB drive being forgotten about for a while, or even entirely. Because that was like our cliffhanger, so you'd think there'd be some payoff to it this time around.
Well,
and there isn't.
Right. And I mentioned earlier that the show likes to detour, and this is a prototypical kind of instance of it. So I have the mysteries of the show in my head separated into 3 tiers. So the tier 1 mysteries of the show are the big, the big ones, the overarching ones that are to do with the world, and also Jack the Ripper. So I would include Jack the Ripper and the Wall.
I'm gonna say immediately that I think these two are connected, because I'm sorry, but like,
probably,
you know, with Irene's friend dying like literally minutes after Irene meets her, and then like we want the egg back. Jack the Ripper's after you. The egg relates to Ward, May, and Moran. Moran, of course, will be responsible for the maintenance of the Wall. There's no way on God's green earth that this is not related. Like, I don't even need to be Sherlock to put the pins together for this one.
I think so too.
So Jack the Ripper, and the Wall and the egg are functionally the same mystery to me.
Well,
I would agree.
The egg, I would actually was going to put that in the second tier because it is related to it, or when it's introduced, it's to a specific character. And I would also put John's mystery on that second tier. Because they're in the...
John definitely has a mystery, like what his personality is and whether or not he's got a brain inside of that skull.
But you know what I mean? Like his, I'm trying to track down Sherlock, and for this reason that he won't listen to. Obviously...
6 months later.
He's still made. But like, I think you and I realize, and most people probably assume, that they're connected, these 2 tiers. All 4 of these probably, but the show is treating them functionally as different, so I'm going to as well. So like I said, tier 1, Wall, Jack the Ripper. Tier 2, specific character ones, Irene's USB drive, Watson's mystery. And then the third tier is cases that aren't to do with the main cast of characters. They're just ones that get thrown in the lap. And the show does like to, when it establishes or sort of tiptoes up to a tier 1 or tier 2 mystery, divert us into the tier below. So yeah, we're talking about the egg, we're talking about the USB drive. Boom. We don't get to sort of confront that head on. You know, Irene leaves, we go in to the Pipe Cat. She's dressed as a barmaid. Very nice, by the way. And then we get this new case, so we're diverted for a while. The show just really loves to do that, and I can definitely see it annoying people. But, like you were saying, I think you were going to get to saying, by the end of the episode, once we've wrapped up this kind of tier 3 mystery with Milverton and Emily, we see, for the first time explicitly, that a tier 2 mystery, the USB drive, is connected to a tier 1 mystery, Jack the Ripper. So we've tied them back together. There were 2 things that we were, like, one in the immediate term with Irene, and the other, the entire episode, Jack the Ripper, that are brought back around here at the end. So I'm glad it happened, but I can definitely see someone going, only now, 8 episodes later? Did you...
Here's the thing. I'm split brain on this. I feel both ways. On the one hand, I'm glad they didn't forget it, because it would have been worse, of course, if they had just completely abandoned the Jack the Ripper plot, which up until this episode I was not entirely convinced wouldn't happen. But on the other hand, 8 episodes with no background reference or even hints that they're still around. Like, I'm not even saying that Jack the Ripper needed to necessarily do some ripping, if you follow my meaning. But it would have been nice to have some hints that, you know, like, okay, I could go get him now, and like, oh no, don't do that. Like, I don't know, just put some scenes in where we realize that he's still around, but he's being on a leash of sorts.
Wasn't there a news report in the background of one episode? I mean, I'm not saying that's sufficient.
That was this episode.
Was it? I thought it was an earlier one, like episode 3 or something, but I could be wrong.
Oh, there was one there as well, but they were only really mentioning like that Jack the Ripper exists, but it's in like months. Yeah. As opposed to like actually, I don't know, having a scene of Jack the Ripper themselves, whoever they are, like talking to someone in a like. I'm just making shit up here, basically, but I mean, just have scenes that like remind us directly, rather than through Expedition News Network (ENN) that he's still around and that there's a reason that he's not killing anyone right now. That would make for some intrigue, actually, because Jack the Ripper, as in history, was someone who just basically murdered for the jollies of it, whereas Jack the Ripper here is clearly a tool of the local government. So you can then think, there's a difference here. I wonder what that might mean.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. You would think that they're like, it would be pretty easy to, like you said, have a scene of one of the characters walking by, a shop with a bunch of TVs in the window, and let the character walk out of the shop, but the camera linger on the TV show where they're just for a second, where people are debating, news people having a debate about Jack.
Yeah, I'm sure that you and I have watched a ton of anime or even just live action TV that does this in so many different ways. So I think it would behoove the show like to try and take the heat off ahead of time, if you will, from people who rightly think, well, they're pulling this back. I don't know, like the writers just had a panic attack, like, wait, we wrote about Jack the Ripper in this, and it's been how many episodes? Right. Oh, fuck me!
I am glad that they smuggled it in on the back of Irene's personal mystery rather than it coming out of the blue. I mean, I guess that would have been fine too, but I just like this better. It just feels better.
Yeah,
the 2-for-1.
I agree, because the thing is, right. You might recall, folks, I complained way back in episode 1 that Lestrade's sister was murdered, and his reaction was, "Oh no," like he just found out, for example, that he hadn't won the lottery.
Right.
Oh no, I didn't win. Like, I still can't get over that, and I probably never will. It's too late, I think, now for us to, unless Lestrade is in. I don't know. Maybe they can pull something out of their asses with this one, but. To give context, like, it's Irene's friend who is murdered by Jack the Ripper to get to Irene. So this is now personal. And that's a good thing. Taking it from being just an abstract, like, this... I mean, obviously we should care about, like, these people were murdered by this person anyway, which is something I, again, said the show should have done from the beginning, given the nature of the people who were killed, as well as the nature of the town they live in. But at least we now also get the escalation of that to a personal conflict, rather than simply being this is the community I live in one, a communal issue, if you will. So that is also welcome. I have a question for you, Doc, again, though, because this is another plot hole. Why did Irene simply try to go back to France again? Why did she end up working at the bar to begin with? What was stopping her from leaving to go and enact her original plan?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can only speculate because I don't think we're given a clear answer to this, but I don't know, maybe since Sherlock figured out what she was trying to do and her motivations, she just was thinking, well, I could let someone else do the heavy lifting here. But if that's the case, then I don't know. Do you think it takes away from the urgency of the situation that she's not trying to, pardon the pun, scramble back to France to decrypt this thing?
Yeah, I mean, she was nearly, killed. Like, so maybe we don't forget about that.
Maybe the attempt on her life made her feel vulnerable to the point. Because, I mean, she's awesome and is smart and everything like that, but she's not invincible, as we've seen. Maybe she just felt vulnerable to the point where, maybe it's just safer to stay with Sherlock and he can help me. I mean, because at that point, she knows she's in... I mean, she might have even been lying from the off, right, to him. Like, I was just going to go back to France. Because as she's sitting here telling him that, she knows that someone wants her dead. and she knows Jack the Ripper is involved, I'm pretty sure. And so maybe that's just the front on her part. And she wants the sort of added protection and comfort of this group and knows she needs their help to figure some stuff out eventually.
I do hope that they address that. And similarly, though, I do question if they will because of one reason. I mean, again, we are in a house of detectives here, so why do none of them ask her that obvious question? This is a thing that I've said a lot in much of the criticism I've done of anime over the time that I've been doing Warui Deshou, which is that so many things that I bitch about, which I think are problems in the show, you can immediately turn into a strength of the writing by actually having the characters in universe point them out. Now, that doesn't always work necessarily. You have to do it correctly. You can't simply just have someone go, hey, why are you not in Paris? And then Irene just walks away. We need something more than that. But that's what I'm saying. This is not only a plot hole in of itself, but it's a missed opportunity to develop this into something more. Now, it's not a deal breaker, to be honest. I'm not completely, done with the show or anything like that. Not even close. But I just think that, for all that there was good character stuff in this episode, I think that, again, for a mystery show, or what at least contains mysteries, they really are dropping the ball on some of the finer points.
Yeah,
here.
I think to call that a plot hole might be a little strong, but it is a kind of thread that they've left dangling. It would be nice to have that information. Yeah.
Or even, as I say, just to have, someone point it out, and then in which point she can even just be, very coy about it.
Right.
That I can't go because, or say, I can't go because I'm being watched, blah, 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 etc., etc. So, yeah. All right. So I have another talking point I want to throw out here, which is something that I need to ask you first. And this, again, is something the show has not explained, but I'm actually going to take this as a positive thing. Do the clients actually pay the pipe bar to go and investigate these crimes or, do these assignments? Because in this episode... No, here's the thing, question. Right? Because in this episode, when Emily's mother arrives, I've already forgotten her name.
I don't remember.
It's Mom.
You're right.
So when Mom arrives, she explains the situation, and Mrs. Hudson says, this is S rank, 1 million yen, no bonus, there and then. There's no, at least as presented, visual demonstration of money exchanging hands, certainly not 1 million yen. I mean, this lady in question, after all, she says as part of her backstory that she doesn't have much money, so I can't imagine her ponying up 1 million yen to give to Mrs. Hudson to pay the winning detective. So, if I may, flashback to when I complained about this show's conception and how it seems to be missing the opportunity to show why the pipe bar exists to begin with, because the state can't or won't help the people who come to it, such as in the case, for example, of the workers who came previously, or indeed the mother here, because the mother, the state will take away her kid because of her health issues, even though it's, I don't know how much more obvious you could get that her father is a man who needs to be shot into the sun. So it's clear that, on the paper, you can understand, hey, what, mother's not very well, it's going to end badly, but, the state cannot and will not protect her kid from the real threat, which is her father being a fucking, human trafficker, basically. So why am I bringing all this up? Because I have to wonder if basically Mrs. Hudson is doing this for free to kind of serve as a substitute for the state involvement, the very thing that I said wasn't happening, or at least that it should be addressing to begin with. And I think maybe it was perhaps been there, again, I'm assuming because there's no outright stated, background details to this, maybe we will get that in a future episode. But that does seem to be what's happening here. And if so, you know what? Good on the show for doing that.
Yeah, that could be really interesting, right? Originally, I was sort of suspicious about this too, and it made me think that Mom was kind of in on the nefariousness, that she was trying to put one over on the detectives or something like that. I just sort of didn't buy some of the things that ended up being true, I guess, because like you said, how could she afford the detective agency? How could she afford to pay off the doctor? That couldn't have been cheap. I mean, he's a doctor, and
yeah, and that only had to have happened relatively recently. Yeah. So if she did have the money to pay off the doctor, having £1 million going spare to hand over to Mrs. Hudson to have them then, destroy the original record, doubtful.
Yeah, I like your theory, though. I think they could slowly reveal that over time or come back to it.
I hope so, because as I say, like, the thing that I think that Sherlock should be doing as a show is to embrace the Kabukicho side of it, which is to, use the town's unique, like, aspects, the way, people live in it, its, red light districts element, the sex worker element, like, bring these elements in and make full use of them to address actual problems. Because, as I've said before, and as was addressed far more eloquently than I ever will in Ollie Fawn's video about sex work, sex work is often a profession that is, the subjects of intense police violence. So it makes sense, just even looking at the show conceptually, why something like the pipe bar would exist. Because it would help people out who cannot turn to state help or aid, to get them out of a jam. Or where if they did, it would result in, things. I mean, the cops are corrupt. Like, Milverton himself says he buys them off. There's plenty of background evidence in the show to suggest that the authorities simply cannot be trusted to help the regular people of Kabukicho. Never mind the fact that they seem to be behind a giant wall for reasons. So this is the point of, like, I am admittedly stretching here, and it is only merely a theory. I really hope we get some expansion on it, because I think that's the direction the show still has time to go in, and it will give it a lot more meat and make it a lot more interesting. It's as I said, though, like, why set it in Kabukicho if you're not going to do anything with the actual location or the people that live in it? There's a lot of unique opportunities afforded by setting in a kind of noir setting like this. But as it stands at the moment, apart from certain elements, you could probably transplant this to any city in Tokyo or ward, and I would probably not notice.
Totally, yeah. I mean, barring one or two things, I mean, there is some nightlife they partake in that is probably confined to those areas in Japan. But in terms of, like, being a dangerous area, it's less that and more like it's just Vegas-esque. But I do I love the shit out of this idea, that Pipe Bar is like an independently wealthy group, paying detectives, and incentivizing them to help people who can't turn to the state because the state is bad. Like, I love fucking so all about this idea, and I really hope it gets made explicit. I hope it's real, a thing. Yeah, I'm into that. Let's go, baby.
Yeah, and indeed, that actually then would make it gel with the original Holmes works, because oftentimes that was the case too, where the state couldn't or wouldn't help in certain investigations, or where the police had failed because they couldn't go far enough. Heck, I mean, the very story in which Irene Adler was introduced was where the state was actively working against her. Mm-hmm. Sherlock was the bad guy. As was in the previous episode, the state is not your friend. So, build on that. Do something with it. Embrace the colourful nature of the town that you've set this in, and its seedier underbelly, and all of the things that would organically sprout from that as a result, like the need for private detectives who will, you can call in a jam because the police can't or won't help you. It's all right there. And now I'm actually getting annoyed the more I think about it, because I wanted to start doing more with this concept. But that's something we will hopefully see as we go along. Maybe. I think if we're ever going to find anything out about Pipe Bar's origins and like why the system is the way it is, it's probably going to have to wait for the Mrs. Hudson origin story. And well, we'll see what happens when that comes around.
Yeah, that's oh boy.
That's going to be a thing.
Like, you don't know if you want that or you don't want that.
I'm going to also say I really did not care for Watson's look when Mrs. Hudson said it was that time of the month and why she had back
I
pain.
didn't see that. I missed that. What was his...
He cringed at it.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Kabukicho Sherlock. You were doing fine, you got the transphobe in the writer's room out and you'd sent him off to the pub for a couple of days. or, maybe abandon him in the mountains, but he's found his way back now. You don't have to let him keep writing for you. You can just, fire him or, punch him in the face. Maybe do both, Why not both, as the common internet refrain goes.
Right. Yeah, and I guess, like, if you were really sort of, like, gripey about... that's an uncharitable way to put it, because the gripe is legitimate. If you were...
Well, it's like the dick jokes. It's just, playing to the common dictionary, except it's not like puerile bodily humour. It's transphobic humour.
Right, I mean...
Because trans people are weird and unusual, apparently, supposedly.
Yeah, no, and in your case... I was going to pick another example, but I think in the case you're bringing up, that is accurate and annoying. But I was going to say as well, like, if you were really, I don't know, focused on this aspect of the show, maybe you could also say, what was her name, Agatha? We find out that she is a trans person. That is her kind of big secret that got leaked to the tabloids, and the show just kind of does this thing where everyone that's a trans woman has still these masculine features. It's like the show is saying, like, don't forget, they're still men. You know what I mean? Like, they were born men, and they can't get away from the manness, because she has a very sort of angular, like, square jaw. That is like a sort of, when you're doing anime, you know what I mean? When you're not just filming a person, when you're doing anime, you could just not do that. That's an intentional thing.
You really could. Or, if I may offer a counter argument or a counter suggestion, here's a novel idea for you folks. If you want to write a show involving LGBTQ plus people, why not have, this is going to sound crazy, an LGBT plus person on your writing staff or as someone to consult with?
Whoa. That is completely beyond the bounds of reason. That's...
I mean,
sorry.
I'm actually going to put £20 on my computer desk now. I'm going to bet you there is not a single trans person on the writing staff of Kabukicho Sherlock. I'm willing to bet you Mrs. Hudson is entirely a creation of a straight person or a cishet person. Now, hold up, you might say. That's a bit unfair. And you know what? It probably is, because that does not mean, that cishet people shouldn't write about trans people or, other groups. We don't gain anything from, like, barring ourselves from writing about characters, who may not necessarily share common attributes with ourselves. Otherwise, all the books I ever would write about bald cis, alt-right looking motherfuckers, which is not what anyone wants. It doesn't. It's not interesting.
You're just saying. So I'm not saying, just saying that the handling of the characters does not indicate or doesn't lead you to suspect that someone who is personally informed and has, firsthand experience with those life issues is on the staff. It feels like careless, and it feels very flippant, and, like you said, leaning on stereotypes.
Yep. I mean, do I have to bring up Hannah from Tokyo Godfathers again as how that was handled infinitely better in an arguably the same setting?
Yep.
Because Hannah works at a club much similar, much the same as Pipecat. I'm just saying. Now, I'm not going to harp on Mrs. Hudson too much anymore because it's only a minor point of the episode. But as I say, like, I think that it speaks to a lot of the problems I have with Kabukicho Sherlock, which is that it's got so much potential behind it, but there's very little investment in trying to draw that potential out in a lot of respects. The mysteries, the characters. Even the good ones, like with Lucy, like, I feel still could have been done better, or at least that kind of work's been done better elsewhere. Okay. Do you have any other talking points, Doc?
Only that the way that Sherlock falls unconscious, that's a pretty top tier way to go unconscious. I could think of quite a few worse ways.
How did Irene's breasts start moving on their own? Were they spring-loaded?
What was she?
Was she a fembot? Is she a fembot?
What was she doing? She was leaning forward, right?
Yeah, but they were moving somehow as well.
Here's a question. Okay. Have you heard of the Buddhist sort of riddle? Not Buddhist. Is it Buddhist? I can't remember, but there's an Eastern sort of you're supposed to like think about to achieve enlightenment. Zen, I think, is maybe the word I'm looking for. What's the sound of one hand clapping? You heard?
Oh yes, yes.
I have an analogous question. What is the sound of one breast
nope,
plop?
Nope. I thought you were going to say something else then, but that doesn't help either.
Because it just makes me like I'm wondering about this in all anime, the sound effect. Like, how do they achieve the sound effect? There's no way like it's an actual lady. So they just like have a
they folded someone like throwing around like a chicken breast or something like
just
that.
plopping a piece of meat onto a. I was thinking that they like gently like plopped a fish down on a soft surface.
something like that.
It's just hilarious.
Really
like, why are they? Amazing. That's an amazing. I need to know how they do that.
Because boobs, of course, they are exactly the same as stuff that you buy at the local butchers.
Totally.
By the way, I don't know if this is true or not. It probably isn't, but this is going to be my headcanon. So Sherlock is reciting something in the tanning booth when he and Irene are stuck in there trying to hide from Milverton, who has come after them. Or rather, he's just got into his room and they happen to be hiding in it. And I don't know what he's reciting. It seems to be the names of something. I feel almost 90% certain, or if I'm completely wrong, then it's still my headcanon, that he is reciting the list of Japanese railway stations that are used often as a meme in Metal Gear Solid. Like when Colonel Campbell in Metal Gear Solid 2 loses his shit and starts saying them back, all over and over again. Again, I'm probably completely wrong. If I had to make a more serious guess, I'm going to assume that they're the names of famous Rakugo actors.
Uh-huh.
That, to me, seems like a much more reasonable bet. But to me, it just felt like that.
Maybe the stations are named after Rakugo actors.
Pass. Who can say? So, yeah, I don't really have much else to add about this episode. Like, I suppose I could just state that we are again in uncharted territory here with Irene Adler, much as we are with any other adaptation of her pretty much ever, because if this were faithful in a sense to the original material, she would have gone on the plane to Paris and that would have been the last we'd ever see of her, because that's kind of what happens in the original book. But she is a popular character, and I, as before, I'm not against her being expanded into, a more fleshed out character with more returning appearances than the original works. I'd rather, as I say, have a work that adapts something even as, famous and, universally well known and beloved as the Sherlock mythos. I'd rather that you do something new with it rather than necessarily sticking to the letter of it, unless you are very explicitly doing a period piece for it. And if you're not doing a period piece, then you've already made the first step of moving away from it as it was canonically created, so do more with it. And that's fine. I think that, like with Sherlock, being sometimes over exaggerated in his attributes to make him like an avatar of wokeness for people to project onto, the problem that I often find with Irene's inclusions in a lot of other media is that they seem to forget or downplay the thing that made her appealing to begin with in the original work, which was the fact that she outfoxed Sherlock. Because you can't have an avatar of wokeness and someone who then completely and utterly trounces said avatar of wokeness in the same show. They're not, or work. They're not compatible, I would argue.
Why can't you?
Unless
have
that's
that?
Well, when I say avatar of wokeness, I mean as in one who is never ever to be then torn down.
I see.
Which is the Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah, I don't. As much as I am not a fan of the character up to this point, I don't think he's been presented as infallible and someone who will never be gainsayed. Like, I think he and Irene, if I had to make a bet, will kind of go back and forth, and sort of there will be moments where she is clearly ahead of him, and there will be moments where he is ahead of her. And I think we see that this episode. She, like, sort of has deduced the pool is where they need to go, and she knows where the box is. And Sherlock doesn't know that stuff. But then we see at the end of the episode, Sherlock is ahead again because he's like, yep, you got this thing. I already know what it is before you open it up. It's your friend's ear, and Jack the Ripper wants you dead. So I think they both are going to like one up the other back and forth.
I would be okay with that. It would just then depend on how Sherlock in particular then handles it, because if he starts preening and smugging over it,
right,
then he would become insufferable, and that's not really what I'm here for. A battle of wits between two characters can be very engaging to watch. Again, provided that, when the battle is over, we don't spend too much time, gloating. So I'm okay with that. And indeed, I'm actually okay with Irene as presented thus far in general. She's certainly, got her own smarts. She knows what she's doing. And she's now got a personal stake in the show, which to me is actually probably more of a personal stake that I care about than whatever is happening with Watson at the very least. His has been so background at this point, it's basically become like the wallpaper. So I'm totally cool with this adaptation of Irene thus far. And okay, yeah, we can't pretend that there wasn't a bit of fan service for her in this. Let's not lie here.
That what's going to work.
But it was
actually going to work for some people, and for those that works for it works, and it's going to bother other people.
But the thing for me is that I was actually pleasantly surprised that it was restrained as it was, relatively speaking. Which, I mean, I had actually said on this podcast previously, I could not imagine what an adaptation of her would look like in this show, given we were speculating if she would appear at all. But as it stands right now, I'm pretty much on board with it. I'm actually surprised at the restraint that they showed with it.
I honestly, I don't know, maybe I'm just biased on the side of being okay with the fan service. But, I don't think it was, bad. I don't think it was, distracting. I think...
No, it was fine.
I think so. I could see someone making the complaint, the fan service, it took away from. But I think the show did a lot of things. If you were supposed to be oh man, Sherlock is in so much danger. They're both in such a dangerous situation. There's more the show could have done apart from the fan service. It commits a lot of sins, if you want to call it that, to taking the tone to a lighter place, and also. Right before we got the, boob in the face and Irene in the pool.
The wet chicken.
You get full nudity of Watson, Beefcake Watson. And you got Sherlock walking around with barely anything on. And then you have all the weird ass trans humor that that's the way more problematic element to me.
Oh, for sure. Look, when I point out that there was fan service, that's not for me to immediately start clashing two knives together like I'm Gary, fucking whatever, Gordon Ramsay. Sorry, I meant to say Gordon Ramsay's Anime Nightmares. But what I mean to say is that my fear of how Irene Adler would appear in this work was that her conception as a character would start and end as a function of aesthetics, which means we're going to make her appeal visually, both in terms of how she looks and how she's framed, and that's going to be about it. And there is a little bit of that. I will, however, credit the show this. When Milverton sees her in disguise, when she's going to this, do the insurance thing that she's pretending to be, the camera looks up, down, and up, her. But that's Milverton's gaze, so I appreciate that, it was doing it that way. The other one, of course, being her in the bikini and, the thing. And, hey, I'm not going to lie, she looked very fetching. I'm not a fucking monk. I am not, wearing a chastity belt that, the size of fucking Uranus. But I also recognise that there's a reason that's there, and it's there because, hey, we need, this fan service and sex appeal.
But
and
Watson and Sherlock, too.
Actually, if you find Sherlock sexy, you need fucking help. I'm just going to say that out loud.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. He's, I could...
The man looks like a bonus mackerel with the skin of a human. He's
a type. There's an appeal there for people who are not into the Beefcake Watson. They want a more skinny boy. Or man.
I mean, I mean, look, like, I think I'm actually feeling about Irene the same way I felt about Mary in episode 5, which was, yeah, like, there's a starting point which conceptually is that they were created, like, visually for aesthetics to have the fan service in there, but they become more than that, and that's why I'm okay with it. But I just, again, want to mention that, you know, you've got to understand, like, there's not always going to be entirely about story or character. Sometimes you've got to self-call things for what they are. But, like I say, I'm not massively down on it. I'm not down it like I've been in other shows where I thought the fan service was just fucking shit. And on top of that, as you say, like, in the long scheme of things, compared to the transphobic humour in this show, that is small potatoes.
And again, the boys in the boys' bath, the bathhouse episode, which is an episode that probably should be cut from the show entirely for, like, plot reasons, but, like, you got the equal opportunity fan service going on. So, listen, I have so much less of an issue with it. And Irene in particular does not feel exploited by it. She definitely feels like a character that will use it to her advantage.
That's true. Again, like, I think that for me, like, let's take, for example, Faye Valentine from Cowboy Bebop. Fan service up the wazoo with her, but she uses her sex appeal as part of her charm to get what she wants. And I'm totally cool with it in that case. Like, there's a reason for it. Now, again, diegetics don't trump, you know, design, so to speak. But, you know, we're not entirely clinical about this. We can still enjoy what's on and before us for perfectly fair reasons, as long as we're honest with ourselves about why they are the way they are and understand, like, and realise what we're being fed by the show.
And I also think...
And for
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, so go on.
No, I was just going to say also, like, I just don't think, like, penalizing... I don't know, you could go too far and be like, you know, any woman designed this way is clearly bad when it's just how some women look. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's not the complaint I have at all. I'm talking mostly about camera and framing.
I gotcha. I thought you were talking about character design.
No. Character design can be a problem, and that was my initial problem with how Mary looks, but then I kind of got over it. But Irene, like, there's nothing wrong with her character design. I think she looks great in that swimsuit. But I'm talking about, like, the way it's presented to us with, like, the insert shots of, like, the legs, for example. I'm like, why is this here? That's here because of fan service, etc., etc., etc. We've been through this road before. Moving on, walking. So that's my problem. Like, that's what I'm saying about, like, being conscious of what a show's trying to do, because that's why it's there, as opposed to trying to tell a story. Now, again, not saying characters have sexy, blah blah blah. Like, I still like show. Look,
doing this on 1.5 speed.
I really am. I'm going to start talking, like, faster and faster until I go.
The micro machines, man.
So. All I'm saying is, I honestly don't think of it as a big deal. You know, I spoke about it a lot, but I'm just saying that I am actually pleasantly surprised and glad that this show has been as restrained as it has in how it has portrayed her thus far. Because I totally envisioned it going all in on this. Like, to the point where it would just become like...
Yeah,
bleh.
I think that was, like, not unfair of you to assume that. But I agree. I think it's been... handled quite well, and I'm pleasantly surprised, not just because, as you say, of the horniness factor, but because, like, there's a lot to her character. Like, she's super enjoyable, and I was super into, like, following her around this episode and seeing what she's about and how she goes about her job and gets what she wants and how she interacts with Sherlock and let's see, checks notes. Jonah Kobayashi-san. Jonwa, sorry. Jonwa Kobayashi-san.
I have to give the episode credit as well for that little touch when the camera pans left and Kobayashi just enters. It's like, you called?
That was good.
Like, that was good. That's good humour. That's good humour.
I enjoyed that.
That's crafty. That feels almost like it's channeling a tiny little bit of Edgar Wright. Not entirely, not by a long way, but I can see it in the distance. You can get their show. You can have good crafted humour that doesn't rely on you know, using bigoted, shitty, fucking bullshit, transphobic crap. So maybe more of that and none of that, please.
Indeed. And having said that, I don't really have too much more to add about this episode.
No, I am done. I have said all I will say. Although, actually, I will. Let's close out with a quick question here. Let's speculate. How likely is it, do you reckon, that Jack the Ripper will not appear or be mentioned in the next episode at all?
Don't do this.
What do you reckon? What do you reckon?
I would say that. Oh, okay. What I want to say is no. What I want to say is they will mention it. They will mention it, and they will continue with it directly. But given the track record of this show so far, what you have to say based on that evidence they will do is start to talk about it and then sidetrack all of us together with some other kind of one-off, either second tier or third tier mystery. You know, I don't know, maybe like
Sherlock's reading a newspaper. Jack the Ripper is back, and then he just pulls down, and that's the only reference we get.
Or it's like just a
it's
just a flashback episode for no reason. You know what I mean? It's like the life of Mrs. Hudson from when she was small up to the present. When it just feels like something the show would do.
Wait. Do you mean when she knew Jack the Nipper?
Oh, man.
I'm so sorry for that.
Oh, Jack the Nipper.
Right. All right. On that note, folks,
when
let's
he captained
out
his
the
football
episode.
team in school, was he Jack the Gipper?
When he was a fish in a former life, was he Jack the Kipper? We're done. Let's fucking call it. Let's call it a night. This show is rotting our brains. All right, okay. So, thank you everyone for listening to our podcast, or what could probably be an hour long of us losing our complete marbles. But if you are catching this publicly after it's been released from Patreon prison, and you would like to get involved on the week-to-week discussion of Kabukicho Sherlock, as well as other things such as helping us decide future shows to cover, both me and Doc and individually, getting access to early numbered episodes, getting access to our Discord, all sorts of great benefits like that, do feel free to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Warui Deshou. That is as little as $2 a month, up to $5 maximum to get yourself the full package. There's plenty of great stuff there, including our currently airing Studio Ghibli Christmas specials. The next of which will be recorded tomorrow, at this time I'm recording this right now, that is, on Princess Mononoke to accompany Princess Kaguya and Lapis of Castle in the Sky. Plenty of great stuff coming out.
Kaguya will be released tomorrow.
And indeed, it will be
to patrons.
You're right,
and those will be coming out publicly later this month. But be a patron, get on those Ghiblis early.
Absolutely. So, on top of that, though, if you are listening to this publicly and maybe you don't have the dime or the coin to spare to contribute to us, we're totally cool with that as well. You're awesome anyway. What we would like, if you have the time, though, is to just, give us a like and a subscribe on the service you find us on, be it iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, and so forth. It just helps with our discoverability, and we do definitely want to keep making more and more content for people. So your appreciation and support is always, always welcome. And of course, if you have any constructive feedback, you're more than welcome to send it our way as well at Warui Deshou on Twitter or at warudeshu@gmail.com. So thank you very much to everyone for listening. We'll be back with episode 9 of Kabukicho Sherlock next week, when Jack the Ripper may or may not be back, which, by the way, that's the second Metal Gear Rising reference I've been able to make in the past 2 weeks relating to anime, one of which was to Premiere. So, go me!
Do you think when he's eating chips and salsa, they call him Jack the Dipper?
Embrace for everyone to the ends of the universe, and a very good night. Good night, Envy.